The alien queen towers over the human, her fury radiating through the air as she growls, "Fear me, human!" But instead of cowering, the human laughs. "After my ex-wife? You're adorable." A tense silence fills the room. The queen, stunned, doesn't know what to do. This is no ordinary human. He stands unafraid, mocking her power. She unleashes her full strength, summoning a monstrous energy beast to crush him, but with a flick of his wrist, he disables it effortlessly. The queen, more intrigued than ever, realizes this human might be more than she can handle. But he isn't here for destruction. He's here to make her question everything she's ever known. Will she maintain control, or will he change her forever? Hey, yes, if you love thrilling sci-fi stories with a twist, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts. Let's dive into. The air inside the dark, cold spaceship vibrated with tension as the alien queen stood towering over the human. Her large, glowing eyes locked onto him, and her sharp fangs gleamed in the dim light. She had never encountered a human who dared show such defiance. Most trembled in fear at the mere sight of her, but not this one. His expression was one of amusement. "Fear me, human." The alien queen roared, her voice like thunder. The sound echoed in the massive chamber, shaking the very walls. The queen's alien features were terrifying. Her scaly skin, her long, sharp claws, and the aura of power surrounding her made it clear that she could end him with a single gesture. But the human didn't even flinch. Instead, he stood there, arms crossed, a smirk spreading across his face. He didn't look scared at all. In fact, he looked almost relaxed. The alien queen took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. She raised her arm, ready to strike, but then the human did something unexpected. He chuckled. "After my ex-wife? You're adorable." The queen froze, momentarily caught off guard. What did he mean by that? Was he mocking her? She had ruled entire planets, destroyed countless enemies, and no one had ever dared speak to her this way. But here was this human standing in front of her, laughing like he wasn't in danger at all. "Do you think this is a joke?" the queen demanded, her voice now quieter, more dangerous. She could feel her anger rising, but something about the human's calmness was both irritating and intriguing. "You dare laugh at me? I will crush you!" The human didn't flinch. He didn't even move. "Look, I've dealt with worse," he said, shrugging casually. "I've been married to my ex-wife. Trust me, you're nothing compared to her." The queen's eyes widened, and for a moment she actually stopped. She was used to being feared, not laughed at. But this human was different. He wasn't scared of her power. Instead, he was comparing her to his ex-wife? "Who is this woman you speak of?" the queen asked, her voice still trembling with both fury and curiosity. She had never heard of anything or anyone that could make a human act so boldly in front of her. The human finally let out a deep sigh, like he had just had enough. Well, let's just say she wasn't a walk in the park," he said. "But listen, I don't have time for this. If you want to fight, we can fight. But if you want to actually talk, maybe we should start with something other than trying to scare me." The alien queen was stunned. She had expected fear, or at least some form of panic. But what she got instead was calmness. And something about this calmness was starting to get under her skin. She stepped back, her mind racing. What kind of human was this? And how had he managed to keep his composure in the face of her power? The queen clenched her fists, trying to regain her authority. "You think you can face me without fear?" she hissed, her voice full of venom. "We'll see about that." But the human didn't budge. "Yeah, we will," he said with a grin. "Let's see if you're as scary as my ex-wife." As the queen stood there, still reeling from the unexpected conversation, she realized something. This encounter wasn't going to be like any she had faced before, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure if she was the one in control. This human was far more than she had bargained for, and she had just made the biggest mistake of all, underestimating him. The alien queen stood motionless for a moment, her mind racing. This human was unlike any she had encountered before. His words lingered in the air, and for the first time in years, a sense of doubt crept into her heart. She had expected him to cower, to beg for mercy, but instead he remained unfazed, his smirk never fading. The queen had dealt with countless beings, all of whom had feared her, respected her, or outright submitted to her power. But this one laughed. "You're not like the others," she muttered under her breath, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to him or to herself. His response to her threats had been bold, almost casual, as if he were dealing with an annoyance rather than an all-powerful ruler. She could feel her anger bubbling up again, but something strange gnawed at her, a mix of curiosity and respect. The human's voice broke through her thoughts. "So what happens now? Are you going to keep threatening me, or do we actually do something?" Her heart skipped a beat. Was he challenging her? His voice held a confidence that shouldn't have existed in a human. The queen's piercing gaze locked onto him again. There was no way she could let this go, not after what he had said. He had disrespected her, mocked her power. He had to be put in his place. With a snap of her fingers, the walls of the chamber shifted, and a cold breeze swept through the air. A large glowing sphere appeared in the middle of the room. The queen smiled. This would be her test, her way of proving that no one, no matter how fearless, could stand against her. The sphere began to pulse, growing larger and brighter until it was the size of a large ship. From within the sphere, a giant energy creature materialized. It was like nothing the human had ever seen, massive, with glowing red eyes and sharp, jagged claws that seemed to crackle with power. "Meet my pet," the queen said, her voice dripping with malice. "I'll give you one chance to survive. If you do, I'll consider letting you go." The human didn't seem at all fazed. He tilted his head, examining the creature with curiosity. "Nice pet you've got there. Looks like my ex when she's angry." The queen's anger flared again, but before she could speak, the human moved. He didn't run or hide. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on the energy creature. The queen watched in disbelief as the human reached into his coat and pulled out a small, sleek device. With a single press of a button, the device whirred to life, emitting a high-pitched sound that only the creature could hear. The energy beast roared, its form flickering, as if the sound were somehow weakening it. The queen's eyes widened. How did he know how to control it? She had created this creature to be unbeatable. It was designed to break anyone who challenged her, but this human seemed to know exactly what to do. With every passing second, the creature became more unstable, its form flickering and distorting. The human grinned, watching the chaos unfold. The queen narrowed her eyes, trying to assess this new threat. She had underestimated him once, but it wouldn't happen again. She raised her hand, her fingers crackling with power. "Enough!" she shouted. The creature let out a final roar before disappearing into a burst of light, disintegrating into nothingness. The human stood there, still calm, as if the whole thing had been nothing more than a game to him. The queen stepped back, both impressed and infuriated. She had expected the human to fall, to beg for mercy, but instead, he had destroyed her pet with nothing more than a small device and a smirk. Was this human truly as ordinary as he seemed, or was there something far more dangerous lurking beneath the surface? For the first time, she felt uncertain. This encounter wasn't over, not by a long shot. The queen's mind raced as she watched the human stand unshaken, even as the dust from the disintegrated energy creature settled around them. She had thrown everything she had at him, and yet he had emerged victorious. There was something unsettling about his calm demeanor, his ability to stay composed no matter the threat. His confidence, though irritating, was also oddly captivating. It was as if he were playing a game she had not even known the rules to. "You've impressed me, human," the queen said, her voice colder now, a mixture of admiration and annoyance. "But you're still in my domain, and I will not be mocked." The human didn't respond immediately. He simply looked around the room as though he were lost in thought. The queen's eyes narrowed. What was he thinking? She had just thrown everything she could at him, and he was acting like it was a stroll in the park. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "I've been in worse situations than this. My ex-wife, for one. She used to be the queen of manipulation." The queen's eyes widened in confusion, though she didn't let it show. He wasn't just comparing her to his ex-wife. He was comparing her to something even more dangerous. Was this human so impervious to fear that he could dismiss her as easily as he had dismissed his past? It was as if he was already seeing beyond her power, beyond her status, as if she were nothing more than another obstacle in his way. It enraged her more than she cared to admit. "You speak of your ex-wife as though she's your greatest enemy," the Queen said slowly, intrigued despite herself. "Is that what you're really afraid of? Your past?" The human shrugged. "I'm not afraid of anything. Not anymore." There was a finality to his words that made her pause. His entire life, it seemed, had been one struggle after another, yet here he stood, without fear, without hesitation. The Queen had lived countless lifetimes, but never had she encountered someone like this. His calmness, his ability to remain unmoved in the face of danger, was both infuriating and fascinating. "Do you think you can walk away from me like this?" the Queen asked, her voice more forceful now, though tinged with curiosity. "I could destroy you in an instant, human." "I don't think you could," he replied, the same confident grin still playing on his lips. "At least not the way you think." The Queen's brow furrowed. What did he mean by that? What did he know about her? About her power? She had conquered worlds, torn through entire civilizations, and here was this human, casually dismissing her strength. Without warning, the room shifted once more. The Queen wasn't the only one in control here. The human, too, had something up his sleeve, something she couldn't yet see. "You're not the only one with tricks," the human said, his eyes sparkling with something that wasn't arrogance, but understanding. "I'm not here to play your game, but I'm not here to lose either." The Queen felt a pulse of energy ripple through the room. It wasn't coming from her. It wasn't coming from the human either. It was as if the entire space around them had changed, had shifted in some way that she couldn't understand. Her eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the sudden unease creeping into her thoughts. For the first time, she felt out of control. The human smiled, but it was no longer the playful smirk she had grown accustomed to. This was something else, something deeper, something more knowing. It made the Queen question everything she thought she knew about power, and for the first time in her existence, she felt vulnerable. "You're not the only one who's been underestimated," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "I've been through far worse than your threats, but this is something different." The Queen realized then that she had made a mistake, one that would cost her more than she was willing to admit. The game had changed, and now she was the one who was being hunted. The Queen's mind swirled with confusion, frustration, and something she hadn't felt in centuries: uncertainty. Her eyes locked onto the human, who seemed to know far more than he had let on. His calm, almost nonchalant demeanor had peeled away the layers of her confidence, exposing a vulnerability she wasn't used to showing. She had ruled countless worlds with an iron grip, and yet here she was, struggling to understand this human who didn't fear her, who didn't shrink in her presence. "You think you can stand here and talk like that without consequence?" She spat, her voice tinged with venom. The human didn't flinch. He simply smiled, as if this was all just some twisted game to him. She couldn't understand it. No one had ever dared mock her before. She was the one who commanded power, who destroyed those who challenged her. But this man, this simple, insignificant human, was doing the impossible. She stepped closer to him, her eyes narrowing. "Tell me, human, what is it that makes you so unafraid? What gives you the courage to speak to me this way?" She wanted to understand him, to uncover whatever secret he was hiding beneath that smirk. The human paused for a moment, almost as if he was considering the question seriously. Then, without missing a beat, he replied, "It's not courage. It's survival. I've learned to laugh in the face of fear, because that's the only thing that kept me sane. If you've lived through the things I've lived through, you'd understand." The Queen's curiosity deepened. She could sense there was more to him than met the eye. But there was also something unsettling in his words. He wasn't just mocking her. He was making her question her own motivations. She had never been in a situation like this before, where the roles were reversed, where she wasn't the one in control. "You speak of survival, but you don't know the meaning of true power," she said, her voice hardening again. "I've seen civilizations crumble, entire species wiped out at my command. You think your little tricks can stand up to me? The human's smile faded, but there was still a glint of something in his eyes. You're right, he said. I don't know true power. But I've seen destruction too. My life's been one long battle to survive, to escape the things that tried to destroy me. It's not power that keeps me going, it's something else. Something you wouldn't understand. The Queen tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. Something I wouldn't understand? She repeated, her voice softening for the first time. And what is that? Hope, the human said, his voice quiet but firm. Hope that things can change. Hope that no matter how dark it gets, there's always a way out. And sometimes it's laughing at the darkness that keeps you going. The Queen felt a strange stirring in her chest. Hope? Was that what this human was carrying? She had never needed hope. She had always relied on her strength, her authority, her power to see her through. But now, facing this human, she wondered for the first time if hope could be stronger than the raw might she had always relied on. Her thoughts were interrupted as the human stepped forward, closing the distance between them. For a moment, the Queen thought he might make another move to challenge her. But instead, he simply stared into her eyes, as if daring her to act. You think I've underestimated you? He said softly, almost as if he was speaking to himself. I've never underestimated anyone in my life. I've just learned not to let fear control me. And you, Queen, are nothing more than a reflection of that fear. You don't scare me. You're just a shadow of the things I've already survived. The Queen felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't his words that were cutting her, but the way he said them, as if he had already seen beyond her. As if he could see right through her, past the power, past the fear, and into something deeper. It unsettled her in a way she had never been unsettled before. You're wrong, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't know me. The human smiled again, and for the first time, the Queen felt it, the unmistakable feeling of being outmatched. She wasn't the one in control anymore. The tables had turned, and she was the one who now needed to understand the rules of this strange game. In that moment, the Queen realized something that shook her to her core. This human wasn't afraid of her. He had already beaten her in the most powerful way imaginable. He had stripped her of her power to intimidate him. And that, she knew, was something no one had ever done before. The room grew still, the tension thick in the air as the human stood before the Queen, unshaken, his confidence like an impenetrable shield. The Queen's mind raced, torn between anger and awe. She had confronted thousands of beings, from the mightiest warriors to the most cunning of adversaries, but none had ever stood before her with such utter disregard for her power. None had ever dismissed her so easily. She couldn't understand it. The human had no army, no weapons. Yet with a few words and his unsettling calm, he had managed to strip away her dominance, leaving her vulnerable in a way she had never been before. For the first time in her long reign, she found herself questioning her own abilities. Could it be that her power was nothing more than a facade? Could this human truly be the key to unraveling her reign? She raised her hand and the air crackled with energy. Her power surged, filling the room with a pulsing, oppressive heat. The human didn't even flinch. His gaze never wavered, his body still relaxed, as if the very force of her presence no longer held any meaning to him. You think you've won? The Queen asked, her voice low and dangerous. You think your little tricks can overcome me? I control everything here, everything you see and feel. You can't escape me. The human didn't answer. He simply stood, as if waiting for her to make the next move. The Queen's frustration boiled over. She had to break him. She had to show him that no one, not even a human, could stand against her. With a thought, she summoned a barrage of energy blasts, hurling them at him with deadly speed. They struck the ground around him, the force of each explosion rattling the very structure of the room. But the human didn't move. Instead, he lifted his hand, and the energy blast stopped mid-air, suspended by some invisible force. He smiled, a small, knowing smile, as though this was nothing more than a game to him. You've got power, but not control, he said, his voice calm, almost disappointed. You're so focused on destruction, you've forgotten how to really lead. You're trying to force me into submission, but I'm not like the others. I won't break. The queen's eyes narrowed, her anger flaring once more. How dare he speak to her like that? How dare he question her methods? She was the queen. She had crushed worlds beneath her feet. Yet here he was, with his simple words, making her feel as though she were the one at a disadvantage. The human lowered his hand, and the energy blasts fell to the ground, dissipating harmlessly. He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't understand, do you?" he asked almost softly. "You can't force loyalty. You can't demand respect. You can only earn it." The queen's pulse quickened. What was he saying? Loyalty and respect? Earned? She had always taken those things by force. She had never needed to earn them. But now, as the human stood before her, unwavering, his words cut deeper than any weapon ever could. "I didn't come here to destroy you," he continued, his voice growing softer. "I came here to show you that there's another way. One where fear doesn't control everything. One where strength isn't the only thing that matters." The queen's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't explain it, but his words were reaching her in ways that nothing else ever had. The sense of power she had clung to for centuries was beginning to unravel, thread by thread. What if he was right? What if the only thing she had ever known was wrong? For the first time, the queen felt small. She had always been the conqueror, the ruler, the one who commanded fear and respect. But now, standing before this human who had no fear of her, she was confronted with the truth. She had built her empire on the belief that power was the only thing that mattered. But perhaps in her pursuit of that power, she had lost something far more important. The human's gaze softened, almost as if he sensed her internal struggle. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "You don't have to keep fighting. You're stronger than this." The queen stepped back, her mind spinning. She had always believed strength was the answer to everything. But now, standing here, facing this human who had challenged her in a way no one ever had, she realized she didn't know the answer anymore. Maybe, just maybe, she was ready to hear something different. The queen stood in silence, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts she couldn't quite piece together. She had ruled with fear, commanded loyalty with her power, and bent civilizations to her will. But now, standing before this human, everything felt fragile. His words had planted seeds of doubt in her mind, and no matter how hard she tried to push them away, they took root. The human watched her carefully, sensing the change in her. The playful smirk that had once adorned his face had faded, replaced by a look of understanding, something deeper than simple defiance. He wasn't just challenging her anymore. He was making her see something she hadn't even considered. "Why are you looking at me like that?" the queen finally asked, her voice low and almost uncertain. She wasn't used to this feeling, this vulnerability that crept into her chest. It was an unfamiliar weight that made her wish for the cold indifference she once wore so effortlessly. The human didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that left her unnerved. "Because I see you, Queen," he said softly. "I see the strength you've built, but I also see the cracks in your armor. You've spent so long trying to be invincible that you've forgotten what it's like to be human, to be real." His words hit harder than anything else he had said. She had never thought of herself as anything other than a force of nature. She had always viewed herself as above others, untouchable. But now in his presence she felt exposed. For the first time in her life, she questioned whether all her power had been worth it. The queen took a step back, her mind racing. "What do you want from me?" she demanded. "You've already taken enough. You've stripped me of my pride, now what? Do you expect me to bow to you?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I don't expect you to bow, but maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop pretending. You don't have to be everything for everyone. You can let go. You can allow yourself to be more than just the queen. You can choose who you want to be." The queen's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a challenge anymore. This was a question of who she was, of what she had become. She had spent centuries building this empire, carving her name into history with fire and blood. But was it worth it? Was it worth losing herself in the process? For the first time, she considered the possibility of a life beyond the throne, beyond the fear and the power. It was a terrifying thought, one that made her question everything she had ever known. But there was something in his words, in the way he looked at her, that made her wonder if there was more to life than control. The silence between them stretched on, heavy and thick with unspoken realizations. The Queen wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain: she would never be the same again. The air in the room felt different now, charged, not with power, but with something else, something intangible. The Queen stood, staring at the human before her, her mind a storm of emotions she had never experienced. She had spent so long on her throne, ruling with an iron fist, convinced that strength alone could carry her through anything. But now, standing here, the walls she had built around herself seemed to crumble with every passing moment. The human, for all his apparent simplicity, had done what no one else had ever dared. He had made her question everything: her power, her authority, her identity. The things she had once held dear now seemed like fleeting illusions, and she could no longer ignore the truth that had been slowly revealing itself to her. "You've changed the game," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking the words aloud might make them more real. "You've made me question things I've never thought about before." The human stepped closer, his eyes soft but unwavering. "I didn't change the game. You did. You're the one who's been hiding behind power, hiding from the truth about yourself." The Queen could feel the truth in his words, like a knife twisting in her chest. It hurt more than she wanted to admit, but she couldn't deny it. She had built her empire on fear, on domination. She had sacrificed everything, every ounce of her humanity, to become the ruler she was. And now, in this moment, she realized she had lost something in the process. For the first time in centuries, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable. She let the walls come down, just a little, just enough to admit that maybe, just maybe, there was more to her existence than power. She had spent so long thinking she was above it all, but now she saw it. The emptiness that had been there all along. "You're right," the Queen said softly, more to herself than to him. "I've been hiding. I've been afraid of being anything other than what I am. I didn't want to face the truth, that maybe all this power, wasn't enough. Maybe it never was." The human's smile was small, but it held a sense of understanding. "You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the ruler everyone fears. You can be more than that. You can be yourself." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. The Queen felt a strange weight lifting from her shoulders, as though a burden she had carried for centuries was finally being set down. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to destroy this human. In fact, she wasn't sure if she wanted to destroy anything at all. The urge for dominance, for control, wasn't as strong as it had once been. Instead, there was a quiet longing for something more, something real. "I don't know what comes next," the Queen said, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But for the first time, I think I'm ready to find out." The human nodded, his gaze steady. "You don't have to do it alone." And in that moment, for the first time in her life, the Queen understood something profoundly simple. True power wasn't in domination, but in the strength to be vulnerable, to grow and to change. She had spent so long trying to control everything, but now she realized that maybe it was time to let go, just a little, and see where the path would take her.